The books I'm going to compare are Church Plantology by Peyton Jones and Church Planting Thresholds by Clint Clifton. The first comparison is basically who should be called a church planter. What are the characteristics? What makes a church planter a church planter? In chapter 4 of Church Plantology, Jones sort of subverts the term calling in favor of being sent and being a sent one or having sentness, describing the nature of a church planter. His understanding is that they are the ones who are sent out, not necessarily the ones who have simply gone. On page 80, he uses the quote to emphasize his position that some are sent, but others just went. This is different from what Clifton seems to say in Church Planting Thresholds. It appears that Clifton seems to emphasize more that a church or ascending church would affirm the qualification and correct character and direction of the planter rather than being intentionally sent out to do the work of a planter. I don't think these are actually completely opposite sides of the spectrum, but I think there are a couple of key assumptions that could make the views more similar than it would seem at first. It seems that Jones assumes a missional mindset for all churches involved for the church that is sending out a church planter, where Clifton seems to operate more from the perspective of a planter who has a burden and senses that there is something out there for him in a church planting role, and then asks the sending church to more affirm the character and the qualifications of him as a planter. I don't think these are different. I just think they arrive at similar conclusions from different directions. I think my personal experience would be more in line with Clifton's, as I feel like I frequently functioned as a sort of catalyst to thinking about church planting and being excited about sending people out rather than a church who is looking actively for people that they can then send out. The second part I want to look at is about recruiting prospective team members. This is not regarding whether or not team leadership model is in place. This is more about the people who are being recruited and chosen to serve as members of the team that will propel the church planting venture forward. In Thresholds, Clifton gives several tips on how to build a team. He mentions asking boldly and directly of people to join the work, as well as also ensuring that there's time given to process this request, and pray and think about what God may have for these prospective team members. Jones describes very similar things, but those are all under the one area of recruitment he calls straight recruitment. He also includes two other methods of gathering team members. The first is where God is very clearly at work. There's a phenomenon where he gathers a group of people together in a powerful manner and is clearly moving in the midst of them to do a work. And then also, growing your own disciples. He says that you can recruit team members simply by making disciples and having them follow you as you follow Jesus. This primarily seems to be the most effective way if the disciples are made in the context in which the church is being planted. If I was to disciple someone here in North Carolina, decide that there's a church planting labor somewhere else across the country, I think that'd be just as likely that they would follow as someone else. I think this method is primarily for contextual believers for the church plant. One area where the two authors differ is the roles they're seeking to fill. On page 72 of Thresholds, Clifton makes mention that a planter should have made a list of jobs and roles that need to be filled, whereas Jones mainly starts with giftings and spiritual strengths that need to be present in a well-rounded, effective APEST planting team. In this situation, I definitely think that Jones identifies closer with what I'm looking for in a prospective team. I care much more about the wide range of spiritual gifts and passions that end up on the team rather than can they be a worship leader? Can they lead a children's ministry? Rather, do they love people? Are they kind? Are they evangelistic? Are they administrative? Like that sort of thing. And so I think the spiritual well-roundedness emphasized by Jones and allowing formalized roles to manifest organically is probably something more that I would identify with. Another topic that both books cover extensively is going about the work of funding as well as the budget that we are funding. I feel like there are many similarities. For instance, both recommend activities such as making lists, creating a database, contacting people via email or letter or phone call in the hopes of setting up face-to-face communication to make the ask of partnership. Um, a couple differences. I think Jones emphasizes partnership and patronage a little bit more than using the language of fundraising or raising support, whereas Clifton seems to exclusively use the terms raising support. I'm not sure that there's a huge difference there. Just wanted to note that. Um, Also, the way that the budget is laid out, Jones really talks about starting from the mission and the values of the church planting venture and then building a budget based off of that. Whereas Clifton seems to start from a more generic church budget, the line items that you would see from a normal church business meeting, and then just apply it to a smaller scale for a church plant. Personally, I like the way that Jones handles this topic a little bit better. But that may simply be because he writes a longer book, and he has more opportunity to go in depth and provide more detail. Um, I also like the idea of being flexible. For example, if a church is going to be really intentional about investing in their community activities, such as a sports league or a gym or a local food club or a book club or something that's going to require some sort of funds to be a part of, that funding church planting team members community engagement activities would be an awesome thing that isn't often included in budget line items. So that's really appealing to me. Another area where the authors differ pretty significantly is in the long-term role and responsibility of a church planter. On page 7, Clifton in his book states that missionary plus pastor equals church planter. And then provides a graphic where at the beginning the planter is spending about 90% of their time as a missionary, and towards 5 years from then they're spending about 90% of their time as a pastor. Jones, on the other hand, argues that a church planter is primarily operates in an apostolic manner. To him, that means plant, pass off to a group of elders or a pastor, and then go begin the new work. His timeline is usually 3 years in one place because that's about as long as Paul spent anywhere. In Jones's model, the apostolic planter is and functions as an elder of the church he's planted for a time, but the plan is never to be there long term and to stay. I don't think I fully agree with either of these, to be honest. I understand what Clifton's trying to say using the missionary and pastor graphic, but I think the division between the two, especially if you're seeking to have missional DNA in your church, is probably a little bit of a fallacy. I think the intent is there. Like you're going to spend more time outside the church beginning, and then you'll spend a little bit more inside the church. But to get to 90% where you're functioning exclusively as pastor to believers and not engaging the outside world, I think that sort of undermines the missional DNA that you're seeking to keep in the church. I disagree also a little bit with Jones that the apostolic model of church planting is the best way forward, especially in a Western North American context. I just think about cities where everything new is critiqued or looked at with suspicion. And I don't know that being there for a couple of years is long enough to show a community how that you're committed to them, that you love them, that you're able to be trusted. And there's also, I've seen leadership voids sometimes swallow up young churches when they're left too soon to by the person who was there at the ground floor. So not to say that the church needs to be formed around the capabilities of a planter, but just the stability that goes with a long-term leadership plan is always good, I think, for a new church. The last area I want to look at is corporate gathering. There are definitely some similarities. They focus on the worship of God, the teaching of his truth from scripture. Clifton spends most of his time, it seems, talking about sermon preparation, which I think is a little bit misguided. Also relies on sustainable number of committed attendees for reaching a gathering number. Jones spends some of his discussion about organizing services and reaching the context where the church is situated. His view of corporate gatherings is that there needs to be more face-to-face interaction, which is something I really agree with. I appreciate the way Jones approached the gathering more than Clifton, primarily due to the emphasis on activating and providing opportunity for people's spiritual gifts to encourage the body when they gather. I also appreciated the emphasis on page 272. Mission dictated models bear more fruit. My main conviction as it pertains to corporate gatherings for a church planter that they should be flexible in style and layout and model to reach the surrounding community, but grounded in corporate prayer, encouragement, worship of God, and teaching of his word faithfully and truthfully. All in all, I enjoyed both of these books for different reasons. I'll probably reach for church plantology more often than Thresholds, but probably because I'm more excited about urban ministry, and it's a longer, more detailed book that probably provides a little bit more color in areas than Clifton's. Thanks.